Welcome to the Governance Discourse podcast, your front row seat to governance and politics. On the podcast, we explore the systems that are shaping our lives, from politics, government, and leadership to public policy, civic engagement, and civic action. Whether you're a student, activist, policy lover, or just figuring out how the system works, this is your space to learn, grow, and lead. Each episode brings fresh conversations, bold ideas, and a deep dive into issues shaping our world. Let's ask the questions, amplify fresh voices, and reimagine governance together. This is the Governance Discourse. Let's get into it. What if your state had its own police force? One that understands your community, responds faster to insecurity, and is accountable to local authorities. That possibility is no longer just an idea. It could soon become Nigeria's reality. My name is Veronica Pana Igube, and welcome to the Governance Discourse, where we break down critical national government issues that shape our country. In today's episode, we're examining the ongoing constitutional amendment that could transform Nigeria's security infrastructure through the creation of state policing. What does this proposal mean for Nigerians, and why does it matter? Let's get right into it. So, in this episode, I'm going to be having the conversation about state policing, why it's important, kind of do like a background of what's currently exists right now, and what has driven the call for state policing in Nigeria. A lot of countries have decentralized their state, their policing architecture. So they have federal police and state police like you have in the US. But Nigeria for a very long time has had our police force federal. This means that at the federal is where our police force is governed. So you have the president, the inspector general of police, who is appointed by the president, right? And the federal does the appointment, and the federal now appoints people to the states. So the commissioner of police is appointed at the federal level as opposed to the state level. So states don't have their own police architecture. So for a very long time, governors have complained that, the number of police is not, proportionate to the number of, residents of the state, and it's hard for security to, work. Some of them have had clashes with the commissioner of police, and the commissioner of police will say, although I'm in your state, I'm not answerable to you. You can't hold me accountable. I'm answerable to the federal level. I mean, that's some of the issues that we'll be discussing today. But let's set the background. There's currently a constitutional reform ongoing on state policing, where the Senate and the House of Assembly have passed bills pushing for state policing. I mean, it's been very interesting because this has gone on for a very long time. Additionally, I have read the bill, so you don't have to, and I'm going to break it down so you can understand it better. But let's, set the stage. Um, Before we talk about state policing, let's first understand the system we currently have right now. Nigeria operates a centralized policing system. This means there is only one police force for the entire country, the Nigerian Police Force, established under the Constitution. So the police force is established under the 1999 Constitution. I mean, it was established in previous Constitution, but right now it's still, in the 1999 Constitution. So that's why this is a constitutional reform to amend the Constitution to have state policing. The Nigerian police force is controlled by the federal government, with the president and the inspector general of police exercising significant authority over its operations. For many years, this system has been criticized for being overstretched and too central to effectively respond to Nigeria's diverse security challenges. We've had issues from terrorism to banditry in the Northwest. In the Northeast, we've had kidnappings, communal clashes, violent crimes in different parts of the country. Many communities have, argued that the single police force is not adequate, to provide security, adequate security for that matter, for our over 2 million people in Nigeria. And that's why a lot of supporters have been arguing that state police would improve response time. The state police, because they're in the state, they'll respond quickly. They understand the architecture of that state, the peculiar challenges that that state, experiences. If they have previously been communal clashes, they understand things or hotspots kind of in the community, as opposed to someone who is appointed from Abuja and comes to the state, but hasn't lived in the state that long to understand hotspots, to understand the people, kind of like the way they live. Someone who has lived in a community will be able to know, oh, this place is a hotspot at night. This place is a terror point, and we need more security here than opposed to here, like kind of understanding the architecture as opposed to somebody that you bring from outside. So a lot of supporters for state policing argue that it would improve response time, strengthen gathering intelligence, because it's easier for someone who has been in the community to have a conversation with another community member. It's easier for, let's just say like you're getting an informant, right? If I come into a community that I have grown up in, I live in, and I understand it, I'll definitely have friends in that community. So because I have friends in that community, it's easier for me to be able to talk to them and say, oh, did you see this happening? And it's easier for them to tell you as opposed to telling somebody else, which they would see as snitching as well. So it strengthens information intelligence gathering and makes law enforcement more accountable to local communities, because you've grown up in that community, you kind of understand the chiefs, the religious leaders that are present. They can call you and hold you accountable. They can also call you and inform you and say, you know what, we heard this, this, and this, because some people would be comfortable reporting to religious leaders, their chiefs in the community, as opposed to going to the police. I know that police is your friend and we need to deepen that and allow more people, reach out to the police. But when just speaking about the advantages, critics, yeah, they are definitely going to be critics to this, right? Critics have, however, worried that state policing could be abused by governors for political purposes and as a tool for intimidation. Yeah, a lot of people have raised that concerns that, oh, if we allow states to now have their state policing architecture, what's going to happen? There's going to be a possibility of them abusing it. And when I read the Senate bill, it's interesting that we look at both sides, the good and the bad of the bill, because at the end of the day, when you look at the good and the bad of any reform, it allows you to identify mitigating risks. It allows you to find out the risk that is involved and to, recommend mitigating risks that would address those challenges, kind of, and have a constant review back and forth, because challenges evolve, right? Because for every reform, there'll be winners and losers. And most times, the best advice is to ensure that you identify the winners, identify the losers, more importantly, and how you can, you know, create a solution around that architecture so you don't have problems. Now, it is against this backdrop or increasing insecurity and the search for a more efficient policing solution that the current amendment on state policing has emerged. This state policing conversation has been on for a very long time in Nigeria, right? So like I said earlier, let's look at some of the reasons why people have been championing for state policing in Nigeria. One, you have this rising insecurity across country. Nigeria has experienced an increasing case of banditry, terrorism, kidnapping, communal clashes, violent crimes, and this has led to many questions of the police inadequacy. People are saying the government is not working, the federal government is not working at all. And when you have this going back and forth, security is one of the key responsibilities of any government. There's this social contract that exists between the citizens and those who rule in power. And most times the citizens give up their power for security. And when you can't provide them with that, security, what happens? They're going to cry out. They're going to say, you know what, you're incompetent, you're not working, you're not doing anything for me, and it starts getting people agitated. And the government has seen this, the lawmakers are saying, we need to address this. And, one of the key ways to address it is changing the security architecture. Because when you have state policing, then they can work better, be deployed better, and kind of like address the situations we're facing. Another issue is that Nigerian police force is overstretched, honestly. One federal police force is responsible for policing the country of over 2 million people. And this has made it difficult for the police to work effectively and efficiently as it would want to. But because it has to be at a federal level and is stretched to the 36 states of Nigeria, including the FCT, it's really, really overstretched. There's also a need for faster response to local security threats. Security challenges often require immediate action, and that's the honest truth. But a highly centralized police system has been slow, um, and affected. I mean, decision making, the response time, it's kind of like slow, and people are getting tired and exhausted. Like I said earlier, the better knowledge of local communities, local recruited officers are more likely to understand the language. Let's start. Nigeria is a diverse country with different ethnic group, different languages. When you post somebody that doesn't understand the language, in the Nigerian context, they'll say they go sell the person, they fit sell you. Because at the end of the day, if you go to a community that they speak a different language that you understand, they can, speak over your head, speak about things that you do not understand. Even with your colleagues, it's easier to miss that communication as well. When someone is arrested and they are brought and they only understand a certain language, even if you have an interpreter in the room, sometimes the interpreter can't interpret everything word to word. So, I mean, there's that mismatch as well. The culture is different, the geography is different, the security dynamics of that community is different. Gathering, and information gathering and crime prevention is a totally different bag. So this challenge, you know, affects someone who is posted from a different zone. So somebody who's posted from Abuja to Lagos. In Abuja, where a lot of people speak English, Hausa, and you move to Lagos where they speak English, but there's also a mixture of the Yoruba language as well. If you come, eventually you get to learn the language, but it will take you so much time, right, in understanding the language better. Decentralization of security responsibilities, like I said, states like the US have done that, and you've seen how it works better for them. There's response time. You see there are more officers to deploy. So where you see officers placed, let's just give an example, in every 4 kilometers, right? It's easier for someone to call 911 in the US, and there's a quick response time. But when the police force is overstretched, it's harder for us to, call our Nigerian police and have a quick response, right? But decentralizing this would, have greater constitutional responsibility, maintenance of law and order within the territories, as opposed to relying solely on the federal government. But you also have improved community trust and accountability. Trust is something that the police force really needs. You can't have a police force that does not have the trust of the people. When the trust of the people is absent, there's no information sharing. The people would not volunteer this information directly to the police. They would sometimes they will even know that something is about to happen, but they can't trust the police. And that's why I said earlier about community leaders, religious. It's easier for people to go and um tell those or inform those people. But just imagine that this person is your guy and you know your guy is a security officer. So you call your guy and you're like, I'm hearing this is about to happen. It's easier for your guy to listen to you, you know, get his people to walk around it and they're able to quench that security challenge before it explodes, right? More prominent, more people who are advocating and pushing for state policing believe that true federalism requires states to have a greater control over certain responsibilities, including policing and internal security. Also, many states already fund, so there's also an existing informal state security kind of structure. A lot of states already form and support security outfits, such as regional security networks. You have local vigilante groups that are registered and monitored by government as well, despite constitutional authority to establish state force. State policing would provide a legal framework that backs it. And that's why, when I read this bill, it's really interesting because now you have a security framework that backs state policing. It has certain minimum requirements, and which we're going to get into on how state policing will operate. It's not, the act doesn't just say you wake up because they pass the law on state policing. You cannot have your own state police now. There are rules that are put, the proposed rules in the bill. Governors, traditional rulers, civil society, security experts, policy advocates have increasingly argued that decentralizing police is necessary to address Nigerian situation. And I support that as well. So now let's look at what changes does this bill introduce, right? What difference is this going to make? The constitutional amendment seeks to make one of the biggest changes in Nigerian security architecture since independence. One of the most significant changes proposed to this bill is that they're going to move state policing and security from the executive list to the concurrent list. I'll give an explanation. You have the executive list, and the executive list in the constitution, it lists certain items that only the federal can legislate, govern, and for the concurrent list, it lists what both state and federal can work on. So moving policing from the executive list and putting it on the concurrent list now gives states that authority to be able to make their own state policing architecture and laws as well. Under Nigeria's current constitutional arrangement, policing is on the executive list, meaning that only the federal government can make laws on policing and establish police institutions. States have no constitutional power to create their own police force. By moving policing to the concurrent legislative list, these concurrent legislative lists, you can bring out your constitution at this point, or you can Google for the constitution as well. The concurrent list in the Nigerian constitution is located in the second schedule, part 2. This section details matters over which both the federal government and state governments share legislative powers. Both the federal and state would have the authority to make laws on policing and establish police service within their respective jurisdictions, right? In practical terms, this means that states would be constitutionally empowered to establish and maintain their own police force. State assemblies, state houses of assemblies will be able to pass laws governing state policing service. Nigeria would operate a multi-level policing structure for both federal and state police existing side by side. Now, the security responsibility will become more decentralized, allowing states to have greater responsibility for addressing the dynamic and unique security challenges that, they have existing in their state. Now, beyond this constitutional shift, the bill also seeks to establish state police services alongside existing federal police systems. It also defines the powers, responsibilities, and jurisdiction of the state police. It creates structure for the appointment and oversight of the state police leadership. It also provides mechanisms for coordinating and cooperation between the federal and the state on certain issues. It also introduces a safeguard and accountability measures to prevent abuse of state policing power. I mean, it was really important because one of the opposing voices to the state policing bill was governors are going to abuse this system. They are going to use it to intimidate citizens. And it was really, really key, I think, for the lawmakers to put down measures that would prevent an abuse, kind of providing like a checks and balances mechanism to ensure that abuse doesn't happen. And when it does happen, what then happens, like how the federal can step in. So now, yay, we get into the meat of the matter. And this is really, really interesting. Like I said earlier, I read the Senate bill, and I'm going to be highlighting some of the key changes. So this is a review. I read it and I identified those key changes that the Senate State Police Bill. It's called SB 1055. Let me break down. When you see S bill, when you see SB, it means Senate bill. When you see HB, it means House of Representative bill. So that's a insider. I mean, that's a key tip for you to keep. So whenever you're looking at a bill and you see HB, you know that that bill is from the House of Representatives. When you see an S bill, that bill is from the Senate. And what is really interesting, I mean, about the bill is because you've also seen the executive, the administration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu push this bill as well. So I feel like the government has heard the cries of people, and people are really, really tired about what's happening in the country, especially as we're coming into an election season, right? We've had a few off-cycle elections, and we have a few more in the year coming, right? Like in the months coming, we have a few. But we're also at an election year, and I feel like this is also influencing because people are talking about security. That's one of kind of the key issues, right? That politicians are having right now, because you're talking to your constituents to vote for you, and they're asking you issues about, see, we need security. And I think that that's why the executive and lawmakers also, because their constituents are asking them these questions. What are you doing about security? Issues-based politics, as should be. What are you doing for security? What are you doing for the economy? And, how are you ensuring national development as well? So the key changes of the State Police Bill, SB 1055, an act to alter the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, to provide for the establishment of the State Police Service and for related matters. The first one is that it creates the state police system. So it establishes the State Police Service. The bill establishes a state police service for every state in the Federation, subject to the Constitution, and an act of the National Assembly. FCT, I mean, excluding the FCT still remains under federal. So the FCT would be governed by federal police. The second thing that the bill introduces or proposes to introduce is the renaming of the Nigerian police force. And the existing Nigerian police force will continue as the Federal Police Service. So it's changing from force to service. The force will be headed by the Inspector General of Police, who is appointed by the President on the advice of the National Police Council. The third one, like I mentioned earlier, is the bill removes policing from the executive legislative list and places it on the concurrent legislative list. That means it allows both federal and state governments to legislate on policing in Nigeria. The fourth thing that this bill introduces is allows states to establish their own police service, which has been a long time coming. State houses of assembly may make laws establishing, administrating, funding, and overseeing state police service, right? So that means every state house of assembly would have to pass its own state policing law to govern how the state police service will operate in the state. The fifth thing that it introduces as well is it requires states to meet the national standard before commencing operation. So once the state policing is passed at the federal level, that's the amendment of the bill is passed, then it goes a step further to say it can't start operation immediately. So because the state has, the federal has, amended the constitution, doesn't mean that state policing starts immediately. No. The state police service cannot commence operation until the states first. I mean, states have to do two things. First, the state has to pass the law establishing it. So state houses of assembly must pass a state law that establish it. Second, it has to be certified as meeting national minimum requirements. Like I stated, there are requirements that are put to ensure that the state police architecture meets those requirements, those key requirements, before they can even start operation. So I feel like that's why it's key for, state governments as well to follow this, because this is really a key legislation that affects them, right? So they need to follow the process and ensure that they are adequately preparing. I think states need to also start preparing to have their own state policing. Hopefully, fingers crossed, this bill comes to fruition by the 10th Assembly. And they don't need to start ab initio at the 11th Assembly. So hopefully this bill is passed. But I feel like state governors need to pay attention keenly and even start preparing already, itemizing, drafting how they want their bills to look like, so they can, have consultations with the people as well in passing that law in their state. It's important to state that it also defines the role of the federal police force. So the federal police force cannot just start operating like that. It kind of like shapes what the federal police responsibilities would be, and also itemizes what the state policing would be, responsible for. So for the federal police service, they'll be responsible for federal policing functions, including enforcing laws of the federation, so laws passed by the National Assembly, they'll be policing the Federal Capital Territory. Like I said, FCT still stays under the Federal Police Service. Protection of federal institutions and assets will be handled by the Federal Police Force. Policing matters within interstate, international organized crimes, terrorism, cybercrime, arms trafficking, border security, national security, and other federal dimensions as may be prescribed by an act of the National Assembly. So if in future the National Assembly passes an act and states that the federal shall be responsible for that, then the federal would be. For the states, on the other hand, it states that the state police force will be responsible for enforcing laws of the state, that's laws passed by the state houses of assembly, maintenance of public safety and public order, the prevention and detection of offenses within its policing competence, the protection of lives and property, and also local policing functions that the state houses of assembly would, you know, prescribe. So that's laws that are now passed by the State House of Assembly. The eighth thing that the bill also proposes is that state police service cannot exercise policing powers outside their state unless authorized by federal law. So this means that your state police can only operate within your state and they don't have powers to operate outside the state. So an example, Lagos State Police Force cannot enter Oyo State and start operating because they lack jurisdiction and the powers to do so. So they have to be restricted only within Lagos, right? Bauchi State Police would only be restricted between Bauchi State, except authorized by a federal law. So, except the National Assembly passes a law that gives them that power to operate outside their state, they cannot operate outside their state. A state police service shall not exercise powers outside the state for which it has been established, except by an authorization of the National Assembly. The ninth thing that the bill also proposes is it requires cooperation between the federal and state policing, right? Because cooperation within the police force is essential and important. Information sharing, gathering as well. State policing sometimes, when, they feel like this is out of our power or capacity, we can't really handle it, can cooperate with the federal as well. I feel like issues that would, pass states. So maybe a state has a particular issue, but it has gone past their state and they can now call the federal, which has been existent for a very long time. They can also cooperate, share information. It's really, really good for mutual assistance, right? Because of the diversity that the state policing would have, they will have better knowledge and, have information gathering will be more. So but that mutual cooperation between law enforcement is really, really needed. And I feel like the federal and state shouldn't be seen as enemies because at the end of the day, these are the security forces that are trying to, security services now as they will be referred to if passed, security service that are trying to ensure law and order. So you have the federal and the state level. I don't think that there should be any conflict within it, but the bill is also proposing a cooperation between that. The 10th thing that, the bill proposes to introduce is also allows temporal federal intervention, right? Some people will say, why do we need to have federal intervention? But I feel like the reason why this was put was because of that conversation that a lot of critics were having of state policing being abused by governors. And lawmakers said, you know what? Okay, so how do we address these challenges? And it was stated that the Federal Police Service may temporarily intervene in the internal security affairs of a state. So they can intervene. But it didn't just say they can intervene. It didn't just leave it at that. It stated instances in which the federal government may intervene, right? It intervenes where there's a breakdown of public order, which the state service is unable or unwilling to contain. I mean, when I read this, so when it says breakdown of public order, which the state service is unable or unwilling to contain, I'm like, why would a state police force be unwilling to contain something? I mean, so I digress. I would digress right now and state that one of the reasons why I'm pushing out the governance discourse is to raise more awareness and active citizens, right? Because if we're aware of what's contained in the bill and we feel like, this is not supposed to be there, when we are engaging, we'll come to that right now. The bill has passed the Senate and House of Representatives and now is at the state level where state houses of assembly are going to, also confirm their subscription kind of to the bill. It's easier for you to be an informed citizen when you understand what is in the bill, right? When you have a conversation with your lawmaker, it's easier for you to say, see, I read the policing bill, state policing bill. What do you think about this? Do you think we can add this level of, or add this and this to make it stronger? So there's not also abuse at the federal level as well. There's this bill coming to the states, and the House of Assembly needs to pass it as well. I need you as our lawmaker to pass it and call your own members to support this bill because this bill will change security in our state. But if you're engaging them and you don't even know what it's going to, you don't know the argument, you don't know what, you just know, people have been talking about state police, we need state police. But you don't understand the content of the bill, what changes this will make. Are there anything that would negatively affect your state, or do you think that there's something that they should have put in the bill that isn't there? Because it makes you aware, you're able to engage. I digressed, but I'm back. I'm back right now. So when I saw this unwilling to contain, I'm like, which state government, which reasonable state police service will be unwilling to contain? But then again, Hmm. Anyway, so it states, this is also one instance in which the federal government can intervene. It also talks about state incapacity, like when the state doesn't have the capacity to address a certain challenge that's going on in the state, the federal can intervene. Now, there is substantial evidence that the state police is being used for systematic violation of human rights. So there are human rights abuse, and there's a lot of hard evidence that is showing that, the governor is using the state policing to harass its opponents. You know what? The government would intervene. That means your federal police service will come and intervene in the state. There's also partisan and electoral intimidation when it comes to elections. Like I stated earlier, intimidating the opposition. There's ethnic, religious, and sectional persecution and unlawful obstruction of the constitution. Federal is going to step in. Threats to national security, public safety across state boundaries. Federal is going to intervene. The governor can also intervene, request, help us at this state. We can't have the capacity. The state governor calls for the intervention of the federal. Now, it's important to note that it also provides that this particular um, amendment also provides that such intervention shall be authorized in writing by the president. So I feel like this is another higher level that it also says that this intervention, federal can come in, but it also puts checks and balances for how the federal will come in by stating requirements, but it goes a step higher to say, you know what, this intervention, it shall be by the authorization of the president in a written form, not oral, written, and shall state the grounds, the territories, the functions that they would, take when they enter that state, and the duration for this intervention. Notice will also be given to the governor of the state. So when this is happening, the governor doesn't just wake up one day and is like, hey, why federal police here? We have our state police architecture. Why are they here? Blah, blah, blah. It puts the governor on notice. It puts the Speaker of the House of Assembly of the state on notice. So your lawmakers will be put on notice. So they know, they will inform the people because they are the representatives of the people. I feel like it's also, having that step for transferring information as well. The federal would communicate to the state, the governor will communicate to his own executives, the Speaker of the House of Assembly will communicate to the reps as your representatives will communicate to the people as well, right? And the state and the National Police Council, right? The National Assembly and the National Assembly too. So the National Assembly also gets a notification, and this notification has to go out 48 hours of the start. So before the intervention starts, 48 hours, all these people have to be notified, right? No intervention will go beyond the period prescribed by the Act of a National Assembly. So I feel like, so there's a duration that is supposed to be stated by the president, but the National Assembly is going to pass another law, and that law will prescribe the period for which someone, or I mean the president, can state for this intervention. Unless by resolution of the Senate in a manner prescribed by the Act. The 11th thing that this state bill proposes is and a caveat. There's a caveat. I need to put a caveat here. I read the Senate bill. So this is the Senate bill that I am reading. It establishes the state commissioner of police. So there's the state commissioner of police. Each state police service will be headed by the commissioner of police. So the commissioner of police would, at the federal, we have the inspector general of police. At the state level, you have the commissioner of police who is appointed by the governor upon the recommendation of the National Police Council and a confirmation from the State House of Assembly. So before, the appointment of commissioner of police comes from the federal level, but now the governors have been given their power, and a lot of governors have been crying since. Most times we've had conflict where governors are in conflict with the commissioners of police, but this seeks to solve it as well. The 11th thing is it allows governors to give general policy direction, right? So governors or the commissioner of police, but the commissioner of the state has to be authorized by the governor, right? But it states the governor or his commissioner of police, but that commissioner of police has to be authorized by the governor. And these are allowed to give lawful written directions on public safety and public order. And it also puts another level of protection. So the 13th thing that the bill proposes, no governor shall direct state police to arrest specific political opponents, like I said earlier. You cannot use this state architecture as your own personal police guard or police force. Governors can't do that. You cannot use the police force to direct the arrest of specific political opponents, suppress lawful political activities. People are protesting. Oh yeah, arrest them. Discriminate against any group. Use the police for partisan purposes. I think with this, the lawmakers are trying to, as much as possible, prevent that abuse of the state policing architecture that would exist in the states when this bill is passed and laws are passed in the state. Now, it also protects the tenure of state commissioners of police. So the state commissioners of police cannot be removed arbitrarily. So if if governor has appointed the commissioner of police in the state commissioner of police, and has a disagreement with the commissioner, the governor cannot just wake up one day and say, "You're fired." You can't just remove arbitrarily. It also puts that in times that maybe there will be a conflict, or maybe the governor has told the commissioner, do this, and the commissioner said it's against the law to do this. And it's like, I'm going to it removes that form of intimidation as well, to say the governor can only remove a state commissioner of police on the recommendation of the Nigerian Police Council and approval of two-thirds of the State House of Assembly. When the governor thinks about this removal and having to go through the council, having to go through the National Assembly, State House of Assembly, I think that they will desist. It kind of serves as a deterrence from that as well. The 15th thing that it does is it creates national minimum standards for all police services. The National Assembly by an act that means the National Assembly is going to pass an act that provides for minimum standards, right? That the national police, the state police architecture. So it's going to do that minimum standard for both the federal and the state, right? So these national standards will cover standard of recruitment, how they're going to be recruited, the standard that's for recruitment, standard for vetting, standard for training, standard for promotion, standard for discipline, conduct, use of force. State when police can use force, cannot use force. Firearms, important. Complaints, very important. How citizens can complain. Custody, criminal information, data protection and privacy just, comes in here. Information sharing, public reporting and accountability. Minimum standards are going to be set by the National Assembly for both the Federal Police Service and the State Police Service. The 16th thing, it's quite long, but it's really important to know these things. The 16th thing that this changes is that states may also go an additional level, right? So the federal provides a minimum standard, but states can in their own take up and say, you know what, we want to put higher standards for our state policing in addition to the minimum standards set. So the State House of Assembly can pass a law and include those standards there to say, although we have these minimum standards, we are adding more standards. I feel like that's also, that's critical. So it gives state police commissioners powers over recruitment and discipline. The State Police Commission has the power over recruitment and discipline. So it also establishes the State Police Commission, which would have that powers for recruitment and discipline. They will appoint officers, promote officers, transfer officers, dismiss officers, and exercise disciplinary control over officers as well. The 19th thing that this bill proposes is also the reconstitution of the Nigerian Police Council. The Nigerian Police Council would include the Attorney Generals of the state, representatives of the legal profession, human rights bodies, labor representatives, retired police officers. A lot of critical stakeholders were identified in the bill. It's a list, but it's critical that a lot of people are put there so that you can get diverse views. You're getting views of lawmakers, you're getting views of practitioners, you're getting views from human rights bodies, labor representatives, even retired officers who have, that experience. So it doesn't take away that. So I feel like in that way, when you have diverse voices in the room, it helps to get, one recommendation that champions the spirit of the law, spirit of protection, and spirit of what a state architecture should look like, or federal. The 20th thing is it prevents existing vigilante groups from automatically becoming state police. Yes, this one. Existing security outfits that already exist in the state will not automatically become state police. It stated it clearly. I mean, I feel like one of the things is saying that, these vigilante groups, are they trained as we want our police force to? Are they going to meet that requirement, the minimum requirement that National Assembly is going to pass? Existing security outfits that you cannot automatically turn vigilante to state police because they are. The reason why we want to even have state policing is because we want some level of security. We need some level of training, understanding ethics, engagement with people, the use of force, when force should be used, the law, the procedures, when you arrest somebody, taking them to the station, following a procedure, reading them their rights, ensuring the lawyers are there. If they cannot afford one is provided for them. Taking them to court in time, immediately after, informing them of their crime, why they are there, getting their statement, treating them in a humane way as opposed to not even having standards of treating. So automatically it prevents existing security architecture from just transforming into state policing. It also guarantees direct funding for State Police Service Commission. So funding standing to the credit of the State Police Service Commission shall be paid to it directly. I also wanted to highlight that it also stated police and policing standards, right? The National Assembly may make laws for the Federation, for the establishment, organization, administrative powers, the duties of the Federal Police Service, organization powers, duties, national minimum standard of all police service, policing standards, inspection, certification, complaints, criminal information systems, interventions, use of force, firearms, grounds, accountability, and anything necessary. The State's House of Assembly too can make laws for the establishment. So these are things that as the National Assembly can make laws, and the State Assembly as well can make laws on the establishment, administration, funding, oversight of the state police service for the state, subject to the Constitution as well, and any act of the National Assembly. So it's important so those are the key things that are contained in the bill. You should read it. I'm going to drop a link to the state policing bill. You should read it. It's not much. It's just I think 19 pages. I mean, if you remove title page, the other page, it's just easy to read. You'll be able to understand better. And I feel like if you listen to the pod and you're reading it, then you get a better understanding because you've had an understanding of what it is. And it's better for you to engage, even advocating for the bill itself, right? So let's talk about what progress has been made, right? And where we are now, where we are currently. The push for state policing has moved beyond the political debate, right? Policy debates. It's now at a critical stage in the Nigerian's constitutional amendment process. So on June 11th, 2026, the House of Representatives passed the constitutional amendment bill to establish state policing and to decentralize policing in Nigeria. Less than 2 weeks later, the 24th of June 2026, the Senate also passed the bill, making a significant milestone, in the effort to reform Nigeria's security architecture. All right. And I feel like I said earlier, we're seeing the lawmakers proactive. We're seeing the political will in passing state police. However, because of it's a constitutional amendment, right? The passage of the National Assembly is one step. There are also other steps that need to be followed before the president assents. Under Section 9 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, which provides for the mode of altering provisions of the Constitution, the bill must also be approved at least 24 of the Nigerian 36 states' houses of assembly. So 2/3 of the states have to approve of the bill. The amendment process is therefore now at the state level, where lawmakers across the country are considering whether to ratify the proposal. If we are able to get at least 24 states approve the amendment, the bill then is transmitted to the president for his assent, after which the constitutional changes can take effect. So it's important to say where we are now. Nigeria is at a defining moment, honestly, in order for us to change our security journey. For the first time in decades, like the country is closer than ever to this fundamental change of how policing is organized and governed. The decisions taken by state legislature in the coming weeks and months will determine whether Nigeria adopts a decentralized policing system and ushers in this new era of shared responsibility for security between the federal and the states. Now, it's important to say, have a conversation of how can you and I advocate for this bill? What can we do differently now that we know what's in this bill? This constitutional amendment can't be only the business of lawmakers, right? There's also about citizens making their voices heard. And it's important that you're not only heard, but you're heard with information, right? Information is at your fingertips. You understand what it entails to have state policing, what is being put in place, so you can start having conversations, even at the state level, with your state governor, to see how we're going to pass our law, what will our law look like. Start having those conversations at what do you think should be in the bill? What minimum standards are they going to propose? How can we up those minimum standards? Seeing what exists in other, climes, and just trying to see if you believe that state policing could improve Nigeria's security architecture and make policing more responsive to local communities. I've itemized a few things that you can do to advocate for the bill. First is to get informed, like listening to the podcast. This is your first step, right? Understanding that this bill proposes what the bill proposes, I've itemized them. Just understand them, read them again, listen to the pod again to just get better understanding. What are the potential benefits? What are the concerns around it? Read the bill for yourself. It's important that you read the bill for yourself, even if you've heard me speak about the things that the bill proposes. I'm going to drop. You can download the copy of the state policing bill using the link provided in the comment section and make up your own mind about the amendment, what it seeks to achieve. Start conversations, right? Discuss this issue with friends, family members, members of your community, right? Because an informed public creates meaningful democratic engagement, right? Now, if you listen to this podcast, if they call you If they wake you up from sleep and ask you, what does the state police, what would be the key changes it will make? I'm telling you, from your sleep, you can, after from waking up from your sleep, you can mention at least five. If they call you for an interview, if you're going to advocate, if you're going to have a video that you're going to put out to educate people about the state policing bill, it's easier for you to state those things because you heard it here on the podcast, right? So start that conversation, meaningful engagement. If someone calls you to speak on the issue on TV, radio, you're more informed, right? Even in your church groups, right? In your religious community groups, your youth groups, your wherever you engage your friends, right? You need to also engage, another level is engage your state House of Assembly members, because right now the bill has to be passed by them, ratified by them. Just reach out to your representatives and let them know your views on the bill, and they have to they have a direct role to play, right, in deciding whether this amendment passes. So I feel it's critical for us to start engaging our lawmakers because they are closest to us. Use your platform, whether it's social media, community meetings, civic groups. Use your voice to encourage constructive dialogue for the future of Nigerian policing. Add your voice to the advocacy. Participate in civic activities. You can volunteer for organizations. There are a lot of organizations out there that are championing for state policy. You can just have a Google search. You can also search for them on social media, LinkedIn, X. See you can write an article on the state police, and these are the things that the state police pushes, and kind of just get people to read and know what it's about. Whether you support or oppose state policy, your participation does matter. Democracy actually best works when citizens are informed, actively engaged in discussions, in decisions that shape our country. The honest truth is that we can't say this doesn't disturb you, it doesn't affect you, this one doesn't concern. It does concern you, but security is really important, right? The debate on state policing is about more than creating another police force. No, that's not the conversation. Actually, this conversation is about how Nigeria can build a security system that works for us, a security situation that is effective, a security situation, a security architecture that is accountable, that is responsive, quick to our daily needs, to the needs of you and I. As this constitutional amendment moves through state houses of assembly, the country is at a pivotal moment, right? The decision made today could redefine our architecture, security architecture for generations to come. If the State House of Assembly decide not to support this bill, it doesn't pass, it's us that would have the repercussions, right? Because we need security in Nigeria. As the constitutional amendment is pushed, we need to add our voices. Will state policing bring security closer to the people? What are your thoughts? Do you think that it will bring security closer to the people? Do you feel, no, the federal has been doing a good job, it's okay, they just need a few changes? Or will it create new challenges? Do you think state policing will create new challenges? That is a conversation every Nigerian has to be a part of. State policing is really important, and we cannot overemphasize it. Changing the architecture of security is important because we have seen since our independence that this federal hasn't worked for us. I mean, it was working at the point because of the population at that time was proportionate to the number of citizens we had. But as we are gradually changing, the population is exploding. We're having over more than 200 million people in the country. The security architecture must change with times, must be a dynamic to be able to address the situation that we see ourselves. So let me hear your thoughts. Which which section or new amendment um, spoke to you? Which one did you feel, oh, this is great? Which one did you not? You say, I have a critic about this, right? Let's know in the comment section. I would love to engage with you. Please feel free to reach out in the comment sections. I always respond to comments. I'm Veronica Pana Igube, and this has been the Governance Discourse, where we break down the issues that shape our democracy and governance in Nigeria. If you found this episode insightful, share it with someone, download it, read the bill using the link in the comment section. Join the conversation in the comment section, like I stated earlier, and follow the Governance Discourse for more discussions on policies and decisions shaping Nigerians' future.